I see the burden you carry, my friend. Not the weight of common failure, no, that would be too merciful, too simple. You carry something far more aristocratic, far more terrible, the burden of being awake in a world that worships sleep. For 10 years you have stood at the precipice, feeling the thin air burn your lungs, while the herd below breathed comfortably in their valley of mediocrity. They called your restlessness anxiety. They diagnosed your discontent as illness. But what if I told you that your unease is not pathology, but prophecy? That the very discomfort that makes you feel broken is, in fact, the birth pang of something magnificent trying to tear its way out of your spirit. This waiting you speak of, this decade of closed doors, unanswered prayers, divine silence, it was never absence, it was preparation. The universe does not coddle its chosen instruments. It tempers them in isolation, in the furnace of solitude where the weak perish and the strong become steel. You have been in the desert, yes, but not as punishment, as crucible. For those with ears to hear, I have left the map to exit the labyrinth in the pinned comment. In my trilogy, the 3 keys to a prosperous life. But know this, the map is useless if the legs refuse to walk. The first step represents not faith in the destination, but faith in the capacity of your own feet to carry you there. A faith that can only be forged in the very waiting you have endured. This is not self-help mysticism. This is existential artillery for spiritual warfare. The diagnosis. Your pain is altitude sickness. Let us begin by destroying the comfortable lie you have been fed, that something is wrong with you, that if only you were more patient, more faithful, more obedient to the rituals of religious mediocrity, the heavens would open and shower blessings upon your head. This is the poison of slave morality, the idea that suffering equals failure, that delay equals divine disapproval. No. Listen carefully to what I am about to hammer into your consciousness. Your suffering during this waiting period is not evidence of God's absence, but of your elevation. The altitude of the peaks was never meant for lungs accustomed to the stench of the valley, will to power. The masses, your family, your former friends, the voices of religious conformity. They breathe easily in the lowlands because they have made peace with smallness. They have adapted to the thin oxygen of purposelessness, convinced themselves that comfort equals blessing, that the absence of conflict equals favor. But you cannot breathe there anymore. Your spirit rejects it like a body rejects spoiled meat. This nausea you feel when you try to conform, when you attempt to squeeze back into the box they built for you, this is not weakness. This is your soul's immune system recognizing poison, genealogy of morals. The herd hates you not because you have failed them, but because your mere existence is a mirror reflecting their cowardice. Every time you question, every time you refuse to accept their comfortable lies, you remind them of the life they abandoned for security. And so, they must sedate you. They must pathologize your hunger, medicalize your divine discontent, label your ascent as rebellion or pride. This is the revenge of the weak against the strong, to convince the eagle that its desire to soar is a mental illness, that it should be content to walk among chickens. They need you small because your expansion threatens the architecture of their excuses, amor fati. But here is the secret they cannot speak aloud, the truth that would shatter their entire worldview. Your discomfort is not dysfunction. It is destiny trying to digest itself into existence. The body knows what the mind denies. Your physiology, the sleepless nights, the racing heart, the inexplicable tears that come in moments of silence, these are not symptoms of breakdown, but of breakthrough. Something is being born through you, and birth is never gentle. The caterpillar does not dissolve peacefully in the chrysalis. It liquefies, its very structure coming apart so that something with wings can emerge. Would you trade this divine discontent for the numb contentment of those who have never questioned their cage? Would you truly want to be like them, comfortable, certain, dead inside but calling it peace? Be grateful for this nausea. It is proof your stomach rejects the spoiled food of current morals. Your mental health crisis is, in fact, the beginning of your great health, the health of those strong enough to say no to a world that demands their soul as payment for belonging. The genealogy of your wound. Why they tried to break you now. We descend deeper into the caverns where the roots of your pain have been feeding on darkness for a decade. You must understand the mechanics of your crucifixion if you are ever to understand your resurrection. You were not randomly selected for suffering. The chosen one, and make no mistake, you are one, is not chosen for comfort, but for containment. Let me explain the ancient, terrible pattern that has repeated itself in your bloodline, in your community, in every system that touched you. You are the scapegoat, genealogy of morals. This is not metaphor. This is precise spiritual sociology. Every family system, every tribe, every religious community operates on unspoken agreements, silent contracts about what can be acknowledged and what must remain buried. There are truths too dangerous to speak, the addiction no one names, the abuse everyone ignores, the failure the patriarch cannot admit, the mother's quiet desperation masked as devotion. These truths are radioactive. They must be contained, expelled, projected onto someone who can carry them away. Enter you, the sensitive one, the one who felt the wrongness in the room before you had words for it. The one whose nervous system picked up the frequencies of family dysfunction like a radio receiver tuned to a station everyone else pretended didn't exist. Your empathy, your openness, your refusal to pretend, these were not weaknesses. These were antennae. But antennae receive signals, and signals carry information, and information disrupts comfortable lies. So they had to break your receiver, not consciously. Most of them don't even know they're doing it. But at the level of tribal survival, at the level of systemic self-preservation, you became the problem. Because if you were right about what you sensed, if you were accurate in your perception of the rot beneath the respectable surface, then they were wrong. Then their entire architecture of denial would collapse. Then they would have to face the very truths they built their lives avoiding. Easier, far easier, to convince you that you were the crazy one, will to power, to gaslight your perceptions, to pathologize your sensitivity, to frame your truth-telling as divisive or rebellious or bitter. This is how the herd protects itself from evolution, by crucifying the mutant, by exiling the one who sees differently. You were not abandoned because you were worthless. You were abandoned because you were dangerous. Your clarity threatened their comfortable blindness. And then there were the wolves in sheep's clothing, the brother or sister who smiled while sharpening knives behind their back, the spiritual mentor whose guidance was really manipulation, the lover whose devotion masked possession. These betrayals cut deeper because you trusted them with the tender parts of yourself. Amor fati. You opened your hand in friendship, and they studied the lines of your palm, not to read your fortune, but to find your weak spots. Why? Because they sensed in you what the herd sensed, something that could not be controlled. A light that made their darkness visible, a strength they wanted to harness for their own purposes, and when they couldn't bend you to their will, when your spirit refused to break into the shape they needed, they turned to sabotage. Not out of pure evil, most people are not pure enough for that, but out of fear disguised as love, control disguised as concern, possession disguised as protection. The woman or man who played games with your heart, who sent mixed signals while claiming confusion, who kept you in emotional purgatory while maintaining plausible deniability, they were not innocent. They knew. Perhaps not consciously, but at the level of ego survival, they knew you represented something they weren't ready for. Authenticity, depth, the demand for reciprocal vulnerability. Easier to keep you on the hook, to use your loyalty as supply, to delay and deflect and deceive than to admit they didn't have the courage you possessed. This is the resentment of the mediocre toward the magnificent genealogy of morals. They cannot rise to your level, so they must bring you down to theirs. And the most insidious part? They convinced you it was love. They convinced you that their breadcrumbs were feasts, that their inconsistency was complexity, that their unwillingness to choose you was proof you needed to work on yourself more. But here is where the transvaluation must occur, where we take the hammer to their false idols. Their rejection was not a verdict on your worth, it was an admission of their capacity. They showed you exactly who they were. People willing to use your light to see by, while offering nothing but smoke in return. And you, in your beautiful, terrible openness, accepted this because you had not yet learned that not everyone who approaches your flame wants to tend it. Some just want to warm themselves before moving on to colder comforts. Your body knew. Long before your mind accepted it, your physiology was screaming the truth. The anxiety before seeing them, the exhaustion after interactions that should have energized you, the sense of walking on eggshells, of performing emotional labor that was never reciprocated. Your nervous system was rejecting the toxin, but you had been so trained to distrust your own perceptions, so conditioned to believe that suffering in relationship was noble, that you overrode your body's wisdom with spiritual platitudes about patience and faith. But patience is not the same as self-abandonment. Faith is not synonymous with doormat spirituality. True patience is the patience of the seed in winter, trusting the underground work while refusing to sprout in false spring just because the surface feels momentarily warm. True faith is the faith of the warrior who refuses to fight battles designed to exhaust rather than to win. 10 years, a decade of your life spent in this liminal space, this in-between realm where nothing fully lived and nothing fully died. Do you know what that does to the spirit? It creates a kind of psychic scar tissue, thicker skin, yes, but also areas of numbness, places where you learn not to feel too deeply lest you be wounded again. The waiting room of divine timing became a prison of perpetual hope deferred. And hope deferred, as the ancient text says, makes the heart sick. But here is where we must strike the deepest blow with the hammer of truth. Even this was not wasted, amor fati. Every moment of that decade, every tear shed in darkness, every prayer that seemed to evaporate into silence, every betrayal that cut to the bone, all of it was data, information. The universe was showing you in the most expensive education available what you are not, what you will not tolerate, what patterns you will not repeat. You are not the same person who entered this waiting season, that naive, open-hearted soul who trusted too easily, who gave without reciprocity, who confused self-sacrifice with love. That person had to die, not because they were bad, but because they were incomplete. They were the larva. You are becoming the imago, and the process of metamorphosis is never pretty. It is violent, cellular, absolute. The old form must dissolve completely before the new form can take shape. Your waiting was not passive. It was the most active thing you've ever done. The daily choice to not become bitter, to not close your heart entirely, to not surrender to cynicism, even as every circumstance screamed that hope was foolish. Do you understand the strength that required? The sheer force of will to keep your heart soft while developing sharp discernment? This is not the path of the weak. This is the path of the warrior mystic, the one who can hold paradox without splitting. The herd cannot do this. They are either naively open and endlessly victimized, or they are closed and armored and dead to beauty. But you are learning the ancient art of the wise serpent, who is also the gentle dove. To see clearly without losing compassion, to protect fiercely without becoming cruel, to love deeply without losing yourself. This is mastery, and mastery is never cheap. The Fortaleza Interior, tools for transfiguration. We arrive now at the armory, the place where suffering is transformed into strength. where the poison of your experience becomes medicine. But do not mistake this for self-help optimism, that nauseous positivity that tries to paint over pain with platitudes. No, this is alchemy, the ancient art of transmuting lead into gold, darkness into light, trauma into destiny. First tool, strategic solitude as sacred practice. The solitude you have endured was not loneliness. Loneliness is the pain of being disconnected from others. Solitude is the power of being connected to yourself, and through yourself to the source of all power, will to power. The decade you spent in the wilderness, cut off from the tribe, exiled from the comfortable belonging you once knew, this was not punishment. This was initiation. Every great spiritual figure, every prophet, every revolutionary consciousness spent time in the desert. Moses in Midian, Christ in the wilderness, Buddha under the Bodhi tree, Muhammad in the cave. This is not coincidence. This is pattern. This is law. The old self cannot die while surrounded by the voices that reinforced it. The new self cannot be born in the presence of those who have invested in your remaining small. Your isolation was the cosmic womb. Uncomfortable? Absolutely. Dark? Terrifyingly so. But necessary. Utterly, completely necessary. Because in that silence, stripped of external validation, forced to face the raw truth of your own existence without the numbing agents of social distraction, you discovered something the herd will never find. You are enough. Not in the therapeutic sense of you are worthy just as you are, though that is true, but in the existential sense, you contain within yourself the entire universe. You need nothing external to complete you because you are already whole. This does not mean you don't desire connection. It means you no longer need it in the desperate, grasping way you once did. And paradoxically, this is what makes you ready for real connection, the kind that enhances rather than completes, that celebrates rather than consumes. The herd seeks relationship to fill the void. The master seeks relationship to share the fullness, genealogy of morals. But here is the practice, the concrete tool. You must now guard your solitude as sacred, not because you should hide from people, but because you must be vigilant about who you allow into your inner sanctum. The decade of waiting taught you at great cost that not everyone deserves access to the depths. Some people can only handle the surface version of you, and that is fine. But you must know the difference. You must develop what I call layered disclosure. Social self for the masses, authentic self for the worthy, innermost self for the divine and the rare few who have earned sanctuary. Practically create rituals of solitude. Daily time, non-negotiable, where you are alone with your thoughts, your spirit, your source, not scrolling, not consuming, not distracting, just being. This is not selfishness, this is self-preservation. This is how you maintain the clarity you fought so hard to attain. The world will always try to pull you back into noise because your silence threatens its illusions. Second tool, the mental diet of the Übermensch. What you consume mentally and emotionally is as important as what you consume physically. For 10 years, you were fed a steady diet of lies, manipulations, false hopes, and toxic narratives, genealogy of morals. Your spirit is malnourished even if you don't realize it. The confusion you feel, the difficulty in discerning truth from deception, this is spiritual anemia, a deficiency of clarity-producing thought. The herd consumes whatever is served. They ingest the opinions of the masses, the fear-mongering of media, the gossip of small minds, the religious dogma that masquerades as divine truth. And they wonder why they feel sick, why they cannot think clearly, why they are always reactive, always manipulated, always at the mercy of external forces. You must become selective, radically, ruthlessly selective about what enters your consciousness. This is not about creating an echo chamber or avoiding difficult truths. This is about recognizing that your mind is the most valuable real estate in the universe, and you are the gatekeeper. Will to power. The tool. Implement a 90-day mental fast. For 3 months, eliminate toxic people's opinions about your life, including well-meaning family who don't understand your path, mass media designed to trigger fear and division, social media scrolling that leaves you feeling less than religious content that promotes guilt and shame rather than empowerment. Any voice, internal or external, that contradicts the truth you fought to uncover, replace with philosophical and spiritual texts that elevate consciousness, the ancients, the mystics, the truth-tellers, music that activates higher frequencies in your nervous system, nature, the original cathedral, the first scripture, conversations with the rare few who speak life, not death silence, which is not empty, but full of the voice you most need to hear. This is not escapism. This is strategic nourishment. You are preparing for what comes next, and you cannot enter the new season carrying the poison of the old. Your mind must be clear, your spirit must be strong, your discernment must be sharp. This requires deliberate cultivation, amor fati. And yes, people will call you too sensitive, too extreme, too isolating. Let them. Their comfort with mediocrity is not your concern. You are no longer living for the approval of those who cannot comprehend your calling. Third tool, the sacred no. Boundary as spiritual warfare. For a decade you said yes when you meant no. Yes to people who gave you crumbs. Yes to situations that drained you. Yes to relationships that were one-sided. Yes to spiritual communities that demanded conformity. Yes to family dynamics that made you the problem. And every yes that violated your integrity was a small death, a tiny surrender of your power to forces that did not have your highest good at heart. Genealogy of morals. The word no is not negative. It is not lack of faith or lack of love. It is the most sacred word in the vocabulary of the free. Every boundary you set is a declaration of your worth. Every no you speak is a yes to yourself, to your calling, to the divine design for your life. The herd fears boundaries because boundaries require clarity about who you are and what you will tolerate. Boundaries demand self-knowledge, and self-knowledge requires facing truths the comfortable would rather avoid. Will to power. You have been trained by religion, by culture, by trauma, to believe that setting boundaries is selfish, that protecting yourself is unloving, that saying no makes you difficult or cold or unchristlike. This is slave morality at its most insidious. It is the ethic of doormats dressed up as virtue. Real love, mature, powerful, sustainable love, requires boundaries. Without them, you do not have relationship. You have enmeshment, codependency, mutual destruction disguised as sacrifice. The tool. Practice the sacred no in progressively more challenging contexts. Level 1, the personal no. Begin with small, low-stakes situations. The friend who always asks for favors but is never available when you need support. The family member who treats you like an emotional dumping ground. The acquaintance who assumes your time is infinitely flexible. Practice saying, no, that doesn't work for me, without explanation, without justification, without guilt. Just a clear, clean boundary. Your nervous system will resist. It has been trained to prioritize others' comfort over your integrity. Push through. Each no rewires your neural pathways towards self-respect. Amor fati. Level 2. The relational no. This is where it gets harder. The romantic interest who keeps you in limbo. The brother or sister whose behavior contradicts their words. The spiritual leader who demands loyalty without accountability. Here, the no might look like ending a conversation, walking away from a situation, or terminating a relationship entirely. This will be called unforgiving, harsh, not giving people a chance. Ignore this. Forgiveness does not mean continued exposure to toxicity. You can forgive someone and still refuse them access to your life. Wisdom knows the difference between restoration and recycling the same pattern. Level 3, the existential no. This is the ultimate boundary, the no to entire systems, paradigms, and worldviews that demand your soul as payment for belonging. The no to religious structures that use guilt as control. The no to family legacies of dysfunction that expect you to carry generational trauma quietly. The no to cultural narratives about who you should be, what you should want, how you should live. This level of no is apocalyptic in the original sense. It unveils, it reveals, it tears down false structures. And it is terrifying because you are saying no to the known, even when the known is killing you, in order to say yes to the unknown that might actually be life, will to power. But here is the secret within the secret. Every no you speak to what is false creates space for a yes to what is true. Every boundary you set is an invitation to right relationship. Every door you close to what is toxic opens a window to what is aligned. The universe abhors a vacuum. When you finally, courageously, ruthlessly clear out what does not serve, what does serve rushes in with such force you will wonder how you ever survived in the cramped prison you were calling home. The decade of waiting trained you in resilience. Now you must be trained in refusal. The world is full of vampires, people who want your light without reciprocating, systems that want your compliance without offering freedom, relationships that want your presence without honoring your essence. Your no is the stake through the heart of these parasitic dynamics, genealogy of morals. Will it be lonely at first? Perhaps. The herd does not like when one of its members breaks formation. But the loneliness of integrity is infinitely preferable to the crowded hell of compromise. And here is what you will discover. When you finally stand firm in your boundaries, when you refuse to apologize for your standards, when you make it clear that access to you is earned, not assumed, the right people will respect it. The ones meant for you will not be repelled by your strength. They will be attracted to it. Because they are strong too, because they understand that real connection happens between two whole people, not two halves desperately trying to complete each other. Fourth tool, the physiological reset, healing the nervous system. You cannot think your way out of trauma that lives in your body, amor fati. For 10 years, your nervous system has been on high alert, scanning for danger, bracing for betrayal, never fully resting. This is not metaphor, this is biology. Your autonomic nervous system, the part of you that operates below conscious thought, has been stuck in survival mode, vacillating between fight or flight hyperarousal and freeze or fawn shutdown. The confusion you feel, the difficulty making decisions, the sense of being energetically depleted even after rest. This is not spiritual weakness. This is a dysregulated nervous system trying to process a decade of chronic stress. Your body kept the score even when your mind tried to minimize, rationalize, or spiritualize the pain. The herd's solution is medication to numb, therapy to talk endlessly without resolution, or spiritual bypassing that pretends the body doesn't matter. All of these miss the point. Your body is not separate from your spirit. It is the temple of your spirit, and the temple has been under siege. Will to power. The tool, somatic practices that directly regulate your nervous system. Breathwork. Not the shallow breathing of anxiety, but deep, intentional, rhythmic breathing that signals safety to your vagus nerve. 5 minutes, 3 times a day. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 6, hold for 2. This is not woo-woo. This is neuroscience. Long exhales activate your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode your body has forgotten exists. Movement. Not punishing exercise, but movement that reconnects you with your body. Walking in nature, dancing without agenda, stretching with awareness. Your body has been frozen in defensive postures. You must thaw it gently, remind it that movement can be pleasure, not just survival. Touch. The decade of isolation likely included touch deprivation, which is a real and devastating thing. If safe, therapeutic massage. If accessible, time with animals whose presence is healing. If nothing else, self-touch, not sexual but nurturing, placing your hand on your heart, holding your own hand. This sounds absurd to the mind but is profound to the nervous system, which does not distinguish between external and self-administered comfort. Boundaries around stimulation. Your nervous system is likely hypersensitive from being on guard so long. Reduce caffeine. Limit screens before sleep. Create a sanctuary in your living space, a room or corner that is only for rest, never for stress. Train your body that there are places and times where danger does not exist. This is not optional. You cannot fulfill your calling running on an exhausted, traumatized nervous system. The clarity you need, the energy required for what comes next, the capacity to receive and sustain the breakthrough that is coming. All of this depends on a regulated, resilient, physiological foundation. Amor fati. And as you do this work, as you tend to your body with the reverence it deserves, something miraculous happens. The line between physical and spiritual becomes less distinct. You realize that healing your nervous system is spiritual practice, that honoring your body is worship, that tending to your physiology is prophetic preparation. The dualism that split you into flesh versus spirit collapses, and you become integrated, whole. Now, before we move to the final movement of this symphony, ask yourself this devastating question. How many truths can you bear to hear right now? Because what comes next is not comfort. It is confrontation with your destiny, and destiny is never comfortable. It is volcanic. It is apocalyptic. It is the kind of truth that, once seen, cannot be unseen, once known cannot be unknown. Are you ready? Have these tools sufficiently armed you? Or do you need to pause, to metabolize, to let the hammer do its work before we proceed to the shattering conclusion? If your spirit rises with these words, if something in you is roaring yes, even as your mind reels, then leave a sign in the comments. Not for my benefit, I do not need your validation, but for your own. Declare it, make it concrete, because the act of declaration is the first movement of manifestation. The universe is listening. Your future self is watching, and the forces that tried to keep you small for a decade are trembling because they know what you're about to become. The threshold. When waiting becomes warfare, you are standing at a threshold now, a liminal space between the old life and the new. Do you feel it? The electricity in the air, the sense that something is moving in the invisible realm. This is not imagination. This is spiritual physics. For 10 years, the adversary, call it what you will, the enemy, the accuser, the forces of entropy and decay, waged war to keep you from this exact moment, will to power. Why? Because the convergence that is happening now, the alignment of cosmic forces around your life, represents a threat to the kingdom of mediocrity. Your awakening is not just personal, it is archetypal. Every T,